Hey y'all, hope everyone had a good holiday weekend. Doing a quick impromptu live because we have some more, let's call it breaking news in the world of SEO. You may have seen this content really started hitting the socials actually last night, but there has been a leak from Google internal documents, uh, basically detailing a lot of information and previously unknown details about SEO ranking factors. We're going to dive into this. I want to give a quick shout out first and foremost to Mike King and the iPull Rank folks, the folks over at the iPull Rank agency. They published this very long explainer last night, and yeah, so we're going to focus on just sort of going through his analysis because he's obviously spent his holiday weekend really digging into these documents and unpacking what they mean for us and some of the takeaways. So I think super helpful to see his analysis as well. So let's jump right into it. The main takeaway here is, as I said, Google. There's some sort of technical nuance here, but basically, some API and like documentation stuff essentially leaked from Google. I think that the current understanding is that this was potentially intentionally leaked by somebody at Google. I don't know if that's 100% true, so don't fact check me on that. But nevertheless, essentially, what this tells us is not sort of exactly how the algorithm works or the ranking factors themselves or the weightings, I should say, but the factors that are sort of plugged into the equation. So there's still a lot of unknowns here. This isn't going to help you hack SEO overnight or anything like that, but it does give us sort of a peek behind the curtain as to what some of the ranking factors are. It also exposes some of the misdirection, or what some people are calling lies, that Google has put out over the years about the factors that they are taking into account. So yeah, let's jump right into it. The main headline here is that there are 14,000 ranking factors. Okay, so again, we're looking at the API here. So first of all, we don't know. Maybe some of these are no longer used. There's a lot of nuance to that statement, but the overall thing to know is that there are sort of 14,000 variables that are potentially part of the ranking algorithm at any one time. So unsurprisingly, Google is looking at a lot of data, a lot of information when determining rankings and SEO and all that good stuff. What are some of the upshot findings here? I'm not going to go into all of the protocol buffers and all of these super detailed stuff, but definitely hit up the iPull Rank website if you want to read their full breakdown and all of the technical nerdery. But the main thing is the first thing I want to talk about is domain authority. Okay, so this is something that apparently there has been a lot of argument about this. I thought this was sort of already settled, but let's talk about it really quick. So Google has basically denied over the years that they have quote unquote domain authority. My interpretation of that was basically Google is sort of using like a weaselly way of saying that they don't use the same metric that you find in SEO tools that is called domain authority. I think Moz is the original tool that pioneered that specific term. But I thought that it was well established and perhaps, but perhaps not, that Google does use some level of sort of site-wide authority as a ranking factor, right? So the stronger your domain, the more likely you are to rank sort of across the board. And then there's sort of topical level authority, which we'll talk about in a moment here. But nevertheless, the upshot here is, yes, that is true. Google has a site authority metric that is likely used in the algorithm. So if we look at, you can kind of look at the whole the whole back and forth here about domain authority and why they refuse to call it that and they deny that they use it, et cetera, et cetera. We can see here in the actual documentation that is sort of being reviewed in this post that they have what is called a site authority variable. So nevertheless, I think that is sort of known known at this point, but we're just confirming that does exist, even if Google has sort of deflected or perhaps been slightly deceptive in how they've talked about that or framed that in the past. There is indeed a site-wide signal about the overall authority and trust of your website. Number two, clicks, using click data for ranking. So this one I think is a little bit more controversial. We have gotten some information about this in the past. Recently, related to the Department of Justice, the antitrust trial that Google is going through, there was some documents and things introduced in evidence, I believe, and some other stuff that basically indicated that Google again has denied for many years that they would look at people's actual click behavior as a way to determine rankings. The reason why I think they've denied that is obvious. They don't want people building some sort of bot or whatever to try to go manipulate the search results and click on their own result, that kind of thing. And just to be clear, I do 100% believe that Google is smart enough to know that they can't just rely on the number of clicks or the click-through rate sort of at face value to determine your ranking or even influence it. There has to be some kind of safeguard there, because obviously that is ripe for manipulation. Anybody could put together a quick Python script and have it search something over and over again and click on your result a million times. So all that being said, it does appear that we are sort of confirming what was previously revealed in the antitrust trial documents, which is that they are looking at click data. So they've got what they call nav boost, which is again sort of a variable or a factor that's sort of baked into the algorithm somewhere, or again potentially baked in. Once again, we don't know how these are included in the actual algorithm itself, how they're weighted, any of that information. But we do know that there is evidence that there are variables associated with the clicks that each link in the SERP receives. So as I mentioned, I think Google has probably a fairly sophisticated detection system or something here to try to root out and stop manipulation from happening. So you can see here they've got bad clicks, good clicks, last longest clicks, unsquashed clicks. So there's a bunch of different sort of factors and variables that they are baking in here. So my guess is that, yes, they are using click data. Can you easily manipulate that by to improve your rankings by rigging up a script or doing something like that? Probably not. I don't know how sophisticated or how great their detection is. I do know, and Mike brings this up here in his analysis. I believe Rand Fishkin from SparkToro, formerly Moz, has done some experimentation around this, and he has basically proven that he can. He was able to influence the rankings slightly, or at least there was correlation between some of his experimentation around clicking on results. And I don't know the full details of the experiment that he ran, but basically he tried to sort of boost his own rankings by Googling search terms and clicking on his own results. And it seems that there's some evidence, that is a viable or possible strategy, although I wouldn't recommend it personally. And B, that Rand was successful with that in the past. So we know that Google is using click data. They are looking at, hey, how many people actually click on this result, and using that to in some way affect their rankings. There is no sandbox. This is the next lie, I guess, that Google has talked about. Essentially, what the sandbox refers to is that when you create a new website, people have long believed that there's a time period where your site is in what is called the sandbox, where it is essentially not eligible to rank in search until Google basically decides that your site is legitimate and trustworthy. Once again, Google has denied this. My guess is again that they're using sort of semantics to obfuscate. Maybe they don't call it the sandbox, but again, there's evidence from this new documentation that basically shows that there is sort of a time, right? So host age is the variable that they use here. Basically, the amount of time that your site has been alive, and they use that in some way to sort of rank or de-rank your website potentially. So Sandbox, I think, sort of confirmed, makes sense. Obviously, there are a million people who want to create a million websites to spam the internet. So Google's got to have some kind of a gate there. We don't use anything from Chrome for ranking. So this is a really interesting one. TLDR, basically, there appears to be some evidence that Google is using data directly from Chrome users in the algorithm. So again, you can see here some of the factors here. One of them is Chrome visits. This was previously revealed in the DOJ evidence, I believe, but sort of further confirmed by this document leak. So what we're seeing here, I guess I'm not 100% clear. I don't think that we have exact data on what exactly they're using in Chrome, other than most likely, sort of correlates back to that clicks data where they can see, sort of real users using Chrome to click on specific results. That would be my assumption, is that they're using that Chrome data to understand that. The variable here is called Chrome in total. So again, it's sort of a obscure or not very clear metric. So I'm not 100% sure exactly what that tells us. So those are kind of the main things that are covered in this article that were sort of, I guess, like debunked or exposed, if you will, in terms of the algorithm and the specific ranking factors. But let's look at some of the specific factors that are exposed in the API. So you can see here a couple things. Yeah, so there's a couple different things that I think are interesting here. These are sort of a list of some of the systems or potential, kind of ranking factors, groups of ranking factors that we think or we know are being used based on this release. As we just talked about, one of them is definitely nav boost. So basically looking at that click data, potentially things like dwell time, even some of those sort of site level metrics or engagement level metrics, and using that to sort of reorder the search results to show the pages that appear to get the most clicks and the most engagement. Definitely something around freshness. We've known this for probably a long time, certainly anecdotally, if not with 100% confidence. But Google does look at freshness of the content as they're sort of reorganizing. So updating and refreshing your content can definitely play a role in its ranking, even if it's ostensibly the same general content. Yeah, what are twiddlers? So that's what this is referring to, what's called a twiddler. So basically, to kind of get nerdy for a second, the way that the algorithm works, if we look at sort of all the different layers, there's sort of the primary, indexing and scoring and ranking systems that basically determine your initial ranking, and then there's what's called these twiddlers, which are sort of little modifications that are sort of stacked on top of that. So again, one of them, for instance, is freshness. If we look at this, there's some interesting tweets and stuff, but basically there's a couple main ones: nav boost, quality boost, real time boost, and web image boost. So once again, we don't know exactly what these are per se, other than we believe that the nav boost is related to site, the sort of engagement metrics. Quality boost likely is related to content quality, or perhaps the HCU. We'll talk about that in just a second. The real time boost probably again related to sort of the freshness or the timeliness of the specific content and anything that is sort of happening in the world. And then there's web image boost, which I'm not 100% sure what that one refers to. I don't know if that's been unpacked yet. Let's talk real quick about HCU, because I want to come down here. Yeah, so HCU, if you're not familiar, the helpful content update is sort of tied in with EEAT, and basically, the upshot of the HCU was that Google was trying to apply sort of a site-wide quality score metric. So essentially, the takeaway from that, from an SEO or content marketing perspective, was that bad content on your website could sort of weigh down the performance of your best content on your website. And so what that meant was that as a content marketer, as an SEO person, you really wanted to pay a lot of attention to getting rid of sort of the quote unquote dead weight, or the content that was not performing well, and focus instead on improving your best performing content. And again, part of that that rolled out around the same time as some of the changes with EEAT. And I believe my personal opinion is that those two things sort of go hand in hand. The helpful content update was sort of tied into the EEAT changes. We do find out that from this release that authors, the authors themselves, and sort of the schema around understanding authorship seem to be pretty important, right? So again, I think there's been a lot of talk about this. I think this has been considered a best practice, but just sort of confirming the detail, which is that Google is definitely looking at who is the author of your page according to the schema and the markup on your website, and they're trying to make judgments based on that authorship. So that is definitely an important one. There's some things in here that are sort of like negative ranking factors or appear to be what are called demotions. So things like anchor mismatch. So if you have like a bunch of spammy links coming to your website and they've got random anchor texts that don't really make sense or aren't related to the content, that could play a role. Excuse me. The SERP demotion. So this is an interesting one because I think this is also one that people have talked about for a long time. Google has denied, but we're increasingly seeing more evidence that it's likely happening, which is, using that user engagement signal. So what was previously known as pogo sticking, right? So if people come to your website and then bounce back to the search result, that is a negative signal, or it could be a negative signal. That would be my guess is what this like SERP demotion sort of refers to, is that if your site is perhaps getting visibility or even getting clicks, but it doesn't seem to be getting a lot of engagement, then Google is going to punish you for that. Nav demotion, likely related to sort of the UX of your website. Exact match domains demotion is actually interesting. So this is sort of a fix, right, that Google implemented several years ago, but essentially people used to spam the internet all the time with exact match domains where they were trying to rank for a specific query by just making their domain name that exact query. And it used to work really well, and it works less well. So basically, what we know is that Google is sort of trying to crack down on spammy practices by sort of flipping the switch the other direction and saying, okay, actually, if you do this stuff, we're going to hurt you rather than help you. And so in this case, having that exact match domain can actually work against you. Product review demotion, as Mike points out here, there's not really any information on this, but it's probably related to some of the changes they've been making around product reviews lately. Unclear if having product reviews in general sort of warrants a demotion, or if there's sort of a system behind the scenes here that is evaluating the quality of your product reviews in some way. But nevertheless, we know that they are sort of targeting product reviews explicitly and specifically. Locations, I think this is related to like sort of parsing between local search and global search. Porn, unsurprisingly. Other link demotions. So let's talk about links. Once again, I got to give a huge shout out to Mike King and the iPull Rank folks. I am obviously just going through their analysis here, so really appreciate them doing all the legwork. And if you haven't already, head over to iPullRank.com, check out this website or this article. Okay, so links seem to be pretty important. Excuse me. Unsurprising, I think, in that we, people love to argue back and forth about the importance of links or other things that you can do in lieu of getting links. But nevertheless, I think anybody who has spent any time in the SEO world knows that links are still valuable. We're sort of getting further evidence here about the way that they look at links, things like that. Specifically, link spam seems to be a big focus of theirs. Once again, I think this is perhaps part of the reason why there have been mixed interpretations about the value of links over the years, in that Google is doing basically everything they possibly can to stop people from just sort of spamming the internet with a million links and using that to manipulate the algorithm, right? And so they've introduced all kinds of signals behind the scenes, it appears, that are related to what they call link spam, basically the number of links and specifically low quality or confusing links that your website is generating. This is why they've got things like the disavow tool, all this stuff that they have now, so that you can really sculpt your link profile, if you will. We don't know exactly how this is weighted, so we're not 100% sure as to hey, should we be super diligent and judicious about disavowing all these spammy links that just like pop up across the internet, or is that really only in the case where we've been massively attacked, or we're the target of some kind of a spam attack or a manual action from Google or something like that. Right now, we do know, again, there's a lot of factors that are baked in here. The anchor spam count, the anchor spam days, anchor spam demoted, anchor spam end. So basically, my takeaway here is that they're sort of looking at this over time, right? So they're not just looking at how many links are pointing to your website today, but they're looking at what is the trend here? Is it increasing rapidly? Has it decreased rapidly? Perhaps unsurprisingly, right? Google basically is constantly taking snapshots of the internet, and so they can piece together a pretty clear timeline of what the heck is happening on your website and all these links that are pointing to it, and make some pretty good inferences, I would assume, about if you're doing something shady, if you're trying to correct something that's shady that's been done to your website, whatever is happening sort of behind the scenes. They can sort of look at this data over time and really draw a lot of interesting conclusions, for better or worse for your website. Excuse me just a second. I'm going to take a drink. Okay. And then similarly, another interesting takeaway here is that Google, is sort of doing the same thing at the page level, right? So in addition to looking at the changes in the links that are coming to your website or to your page, Google also has these sort of snapshots of your website and your pages over time, and so they can sort of understand again, like, what changes are you making? Are you doing things to improve your content, etc. And so again, essentially, I think there's sort of a factor here that Google may or may not. This is slightly conjecture, but based on the evidence we're seeing here, it would make sense to me that Google is basically looking at your website and saying, "Hey, is this site trying to make improvements over time, or are they trying to game the algorithm?" Right. So one of the things that we've seen is, hey, I can update my blog post and repost it with the exact same content, but just update the date, and Google will give it a boost, which may still be true. But I think over the long term, Google has enough data that they could root that out. They could look at that and they could say, "Hey, this guy keeps doing the same thing over and over again. He keeps updating the same blog post with a new date. He doesn't change much of the content." And in theory, they could actually punish you for that, if you're sort of doing that purely for SEO boost and not actually making any substantial updates to the content itself. So again, I don't know that that's happening. That's conjecture from on my part, but I do think that what we see in the data is that Google has the information they would need to make that kind of a decision, and perhaps even impose that kind of a penalty. Let's see. Scrolling down here, font size of terms and links matter. So that's interesting. Yeah, I love this anecdote from Mike. I remember these days. We did was bold and underline text to make certain passages bigger or make them appear more important. Yeah. Yeah, interestingly, excuse me once again. Interestingly, what this API is showing us is that they certainly collect information on the weight, which we assume to be the like the font weight, and the font size of the anchor text, and things like that. But I guess, just to be clear, I don't think that we know that that's baked in, right? It's possible that they have collected that data historically and it's still in the API or in the documentation, but that they're not using it. Unclear, I would say. Interesting. I didn't see this previously, but Mike says they didn't see a single mention of disavow, which is interesting. Short content is scored for originality. That is also very interesting. So yeah, basically, a couple things that we're kind of confirming here, which is that Google is, there's sort of a limit to the number of words on your page, or characters on your page that Google is going to sort of take into account. Short content, or content specifically represented by a number of bits, it appears. There's some kind of an original content score that's being applied here, which again is sort of unsurprising, right? We've got things like duplicate content issues and stuff like that happen across the web. In general, right, your content should be original and unique. So it makes sense that they would have some way to score that or rank that behind the scenes. Page titles are still measured against queries. Once again, unsurprising, right? We've known for a long time, best practice has generally been, if you're trying to target a specific keyword or query, you want to generally use that keyword in the title, and ideally towards the front of the title. I think we can surmise that Google takes that into account as a potential ranking factor, but it's also sort of reinforced by the user engagement factors that we just talked about. If the user sees the query that they're typing in the title of the link, they're likely, I would assume, more likely to click on that particular link because it matches exactly what they just searched for. Let's see. Some interesting stuff here about schema. So I think this is one that's interesting, right? So dates are very important. He talks about the byline date, the syntactic date, and the semantic date. So basically, Google again is looking at sort of a snapshot of your content over time. In part, I would assume based on the schema that is on your page that helps them understand things like when it was published or updated, etc. So that's super interesting. Video focused sites are treated differently. Your money, your life sites are specifically scored. Yeah, lots of stuff in here. So I'm not going to go through all of this forever. This is an interesting one here. Google may be torching small sites on purpose. So they have a specific flag that indicates the site is a small personal site. Yeah, my guess is that this is sort of a toggle, maybe even a newer thing that they have tried to implement. If you've been around the last 6 months, and you've probably seen, people have been complaining like crazy because the SERPs have been primarily dominated by large websites, publishers, etc. Small personal websites um, have been demoted or knocked out of the SERPs in many cases and for many topics. And so, this could be Google's response to that. This could be the thing that led to that. Unclear at this time, but nevertheless, it seems like they are aware and they are trying to parse between, sort of personal sites, which I think, are sort of like the niche blogs, those kind of things that have sort of had a heyday for the last few years, and bigger publishers and bigger websites that are sort of represent a company rather than an individual trying to kind of write for the internet. So yeah, interesting delineation there. I don't know how they determine that, but clearly they have some way that they are behind the scenes trying to make that judgment. Okay, so let's talk about some other stuff. I'm not going to go too deep into some of these things that Mike covers here, frankly, because the technical bits here are a little bit over my head. But there's some stuff about like neural semantic retrieval and some other things that are interesting. So once again, shout out to Mike King and the iPol Rank crew. And if you have not been to their website and read this full thing, I would encourage you to do that. Let's talk about the action items that Mike talks about, and then we can kind of debrief on this. I love this. He wants Google to send Rand Fishkin an apology for sort of gaslighting him over the years, which I love that. Make great content and promote it well. That's always the takeaway from these things. Bring back correlation studies. I think that's an interesting one. We've seen over the years many different sites and individuals in the SEO space have done their own sort of studies to try to determine, hey, does this seem to be a ranking factor? What kind of correlation exists here? I think, frankly, it's been more difficult to conduct those kind of analyses because the SERP has been more volatile. So that being said, I like Mike's call here, which is that, it'd be great to see more of those things. Test and learn. I think obviously that's a big one. But let's sort of take a step back and talk about my sort of takeaways from this. This is just my opinion. I guess I'm not super shocked here. I don't see anything in this leak that is really blowing me away. One thing that I do think is really interesting is the user signals stuff. Certainly, I would never recommend anybody tries to manipulate that in any kind of meaningful way, right? So, I don't know, building a bot or getting all your friends and family to go click on your website, that kind of thing. But nevertheless, I think we know a couple of things. One is that that puts a lot of importance on your meta title, to the extent that Google does not rewrite it for you, but trying to optimize those sort of specific things for click-through rate on the SERP, often overlooked, in my opinion. Even, I'm guilty of that. Certainly, you write the article once, you think about refreshing the content itself, but you don't always, take the time to really tinker with the individual titles and meta descriptions, that kind of stuff. Again, in part, understandably, because Google does rewrite a lot of that stuff and they sort of pick their own meta descriptions a lot of times, etc. But might be worth spending more time and effort there. The other thing is certainly the user experience component of this, right? So I think what we're seeing right now is a lot more experimentation around like what is the best way to provide value to the user really quickly in terms of content. So I think there's sort of a backlash or a pendulum swing against the sort of the recipe problem, right? Which is the idea that, hey, we've got all these recipes on the internet, but everybody writes like a giant novel before they get to the actual recipe to try to please the Google gods, which improves their ranking, but actually tanks the user experience because I've got to scroll through 20 pages of content and ads before I get to the actual recipe. in part, I think that will be solved, quote unquote, solved by Google, by AI, the AI overviews. But I think from a content perspective, in terms of building our pages, I think we need to do a better job of providing value up front to the users. I think that's going to help improve those engagement metrics, which seem to feed into some of the factors that Google is at least taking into account behind the scenes. Once again, we don't know exactly what how these are used, or even if they're used. Right, there's a chance that, hey, we've got all these ranking factors and the weight is set to 0 on these things. So it's important to keep that in mind as we think about the takeaways from this leak. The other thing that I want to talk about is that I think it's important to recognize that there are 14,000 potential factors in here, right? So certainly there are some general themes. Content quality seems to be one. Authorship and sort of the EEAT stuff. Those things all seem to be one. The user experience I just mentioned, and then links seem to be clearly an important thing. So I think broad strokes, my takeaway here is that, like, while Google has perhaps deflected or used sort of semantics to obfuscate some of their specific factors or some of the specific things happening behind the scenes, not surprising they've done that. I think they haven't really lied to us in terms of the actual broad strokes things that they care about. Again, it comes down to serving the user and providing the best content from the best possible sources, etc. I think the factors here actually reinforce a lot of that, even if they've been sort of sneaky about how they measure that. But again, that's not surprising to me. Everybody wants to spam the internet. Everybody wants to rank number 1 on Google. So, the more information they tell us, the more straightforward information they provide about how those factors are determined, the more people are just going to manipulate it for their own benefit. So we don't want that, obviously. I think the broad strokes are still the same. Get links, have a strong domain, have authoritative authors, create good content. Overall, I think those are still kind of the main takeaways here. But yeah, that's the stream for today. Hopefully this has been helpful. Once again, I want to give one more quick shout out to the iPull Rank crew, Mike King. Thanks for doing this analysis and pulling this together. I know you guys aren't the only ones, but certainly the analysis that I have seen around the internet the most in the last couple of days, or the last day or so. Yeah, check out their website, iPullRank.com, and their blog there to read their full analysis. Thanks y'all for joining me, and yeah, see you in the next one. Cheers.